There are three kinds of women at a funeral. The ones who cry because society expects it, the ones who cry because grief is performative currency, and the ones who cry because they're carrying a secret so devastating it's slowly killing them from the inside out. Riley Bennett was the third kind, and she was about to discover that some secrets don't stay buried, even when you're standing in a cemetery. The rain came down like God himself was trying to wash away her sins. Riley stood 50 feet from the small grave, clutching pink roses so tightly the thorns bit into her palms. She'd been watching for 20 minutes, waiting for the tall man in the expensive black coat to leave. But Dominic Caruso, the man who'd raised her son, the man who had no idea she existed, wasn't moving. And when he finally turned and locked eyes with her across the rain-soaked cemetery, Riley knew with bone-deep certainty that her carefully constructed life was about to shatter into 1,000 irreparable pieces. But to understand how a 26-year-old woman ended up sobbing at a Mafia boss's son's grave, we need to go back. Back to where it all started. Back to the moment Riley learned that being invisible was sometimes the kindest thing the world could do to you. 8 years earlier, Riley's hands shook as she stared at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. 18 years old. 3 months away from high school graduation. And pregnant by a man whose idea of love involved bruises she'd learned to hide under long sleeves and careful makeup. Marcus Webb wasn't just her boyfriend. He was a low-level enforcer for one of the smaller crime families in Chicago, the kind of man who confused violence with strength and possession with love. The kind of man Riley's mother had warned her about before the cancer took her 2 years earlier. "You're lying." Marcus's voice was cold when she told him. They were in his apartment, the place that always smelled like cigarette smoke and rage. "You're trying to trap me." "I'm not lying." Riley's voice was barely a whisper. She'd learned early that quiet sometimes kept you safer than loud. "I'm pregnant, Marcus. We need to figure out." His hand connected with her face so fast she didn't see it coming. Riley hit the wall, tasting copper. "You're not keeping it." Marcus stood over her, eyes dead as a shark's. "You hear me? You get rid of it, or I get rid of you. A baby is weakness, and I don't do weak." Riley touched her stomach instinctively, protectively. And in that moment, something crystallized inside her, something harder and sharper than fear. She wasn't going to let this man destroy her child the way he'd been systematically destroying her. That night, while Marcus was passed out drunk, Riley took $300 from his wallet, packed a single backpack, and walked out of his life forever. She was smart enough to know that forever might not be very long if Marcus decided to come looking. The group home St. Catherine's Home for Unwed Mothers looked exactly like what it was, a place where society sent girls it wanted to forget. Riley arrived on a rainy Tuesday evening, exhausted and terrified, with nowhere else to go. "You're young." Sister Margaret, the intake coordinator, had kind eyes behind stern glasses. "Do you have family?" "No." Riley's father had left when she was 12. Her mother was dead. Her grandmother wanted nothing to do with a pregnant teenage granddaughter who'd thrown her life away. And the father? Riley's hand went instinctively to the fading bruise on her jaw. "He's not in the picture. He can never be in the picture." Sister Margaret studied her for a long moment. "We have options, Riley. Adoption services. Good families. People who can give your baby things you can't. I want to keep him." The words came out fierce, desperate. Riley already knew it was a boy somehow, deep in her bones. "I want to be his mother." Wanting and being able are two different things, sweetheart. Sister Margaret's voice wasn't unkind, just realistic. "You're 18 with no money, no job, no support system, and you're running from a man who sounds dangerous. What kind of life can you give a child?" Riley had no answer. Because Sister Margaret was right. Over the next 6 months, as Riley's belly grew and her future narrowed, she watched other girls come and go. Some kept their babies, disappearing into a system that would likely devour them. Others chose adoption, signing papers with shaking hands and empty arms. Riley couldn't decide which fate was crueler. The decision: Riley went into labor 3 weeks early, alone in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and broken dreams. 23 hours of pain that felt like her body was trying to turn itself inside out. No family holding her hand. No partner coaching her through contractions. Just Riley and the terrifying knowledge that whatever happened next would change everything. When they finally placed her son in her arms, Riley understood for the first time what people meant when they said love could break you. He was perfect. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Dark hair. Tiny fingers that gripped hers with surprising strength. Eyes that hadn't opened yet but that she somehow knew would be brown, like hers. Have you chosen a name? The nurse smiled, clipboard ready. Riley looked down at her son, this tiny person she'd made. Andrew, she whispered. His name is Andrew. For 6 hours, Riley held him. Memorized his face. The shape of his nose. The way he made small sounds in his sleep. The weight of him against her chest. And then Sister Margaret came with the papers. Riley, we've found a family. A good family. They can give Andrew everything: safety, education, opportunity. A mother who wants nothing more than to love a child. A father who can protect him. What's his name? Riley asked. The father. Dominic Caruso. He's successful. Wealthy. Influential. Riley had been 18, not stupid. She'd heard the Caruso name. Everyone in Chicago had. Organized crime, legitimate businesses, the kind of power that made people look away. He's dangerous. He's powerful, Sister Margaret corrected gently. And his wife, Sophia, she's desperate for a child. She can't have her own. They'll love him, Riley. They'll give him the world. Riley looked down at Andrew, sleeping peacefully in her arms. She thought about Marcus, about the bruises, about the rage. She thought about her empty bank account and a group home's deadline. She thought about trying to raise a son while looking over her shoulder for a violent ex-boyfriend. She thought about what kind of mother she could be versus what kind of mother Andrew deserved. I need a promise, Riley said, tears streaming down her face. I need you to promise me that Marcus Webb never finds out about him. That the adoption is sealed so tight no one can break it. That my baby boy gets to grow up safe. I promise. Sister Margaret squeezed her hand. Riley signed the papers an hour later. They took Andrew before she could change her mind, before she could grab him and run and damn the consequences. The nurse had said it would be easier if she didn't hold him too long. That was a lie. Nothing would ever be easy again. 7 years of shadows for 2 years, Riley tried to move forward. She got her GED. She worked 3 jobs, waitressing, cleaning offices at night, stocking shelves at a 24-hour grocery store. She saved every penny, moved to a studio apartment that was barely bigger than a closet, and tried to convince herself she'd made the right choice. But Andrew haunted every quiet moment. His birthday would come and Riley would wonder what he looked like now. Was he walking? Talking? Did he laugh? Was he happy? When Andrew turned 2, Riley broke. She spent 6 months' savings hiring a private investigator to find him. The PI, a former cop named Janet Rodriguez, was expensive and cautious. This is a sealed adoption, Janet warned. If I find him and you make contact, you could face legal consequences. And if the Caruso family finds out someone's digging into their private life. She didn't finish the sentence. I just need to know he's okay, Riley said. I need to see him, just once, from a distance. I need to know I didn't make a mistake. 3 months later, Janet handed her a file. Inside was an address in Lincoln Park, one of Chicago's wealthiest neighborhoods. Photos of a beautiful brownstone with a small garden. And one picture of a 2-year-old boy playing in that garden, dark curls, bright smile, clutching a stuffed elephant. Andrew. Riley started watching from a distance. Never close enough to be noticed. Never long enough to seem suspicious. Just glimpses. A woman who happened to be walking past the park when Andrew was there with his nanny. A customer in a coffee shop when Sophia brought him in for hot chocolate. Riley watched her son grow from a distance, collecting moments like precious stones. His first day of preschool. His 5th birthday party in the garden. The way he ran, arms spread wide like he could fly. She watched him live the life she'd given him, the life she couldn't provide. And she told herself it was enough. It had to be enough. The day everything broke, Riley was working her morning shift at the cafe when she overheard 2 women talking at a corner table. "Did you hear about the Caruso boy? Terrible tragedy. I heard he drowned." "Poor thing, only 7 years old." Riley's coffee pot slipped from her hands, shattering across the floor. No. No. Not Andrew. Not her baby. She left work without explanation, ignoring her manager's protests. She ran 6 blocks to the nearest library, hands shaking so badly she could barely type on the computer. The news article confirmed her worst nightmare. Andrew Caruso, 7, son of businessman Dominic Caruso, found unresponsive in family pool. Pronounced dead at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Authorities ruled death accidental drowning. Riley read the words over and over until they blurred. Accidental drowning. Accidental. As if her son's life had ended on a random Tuesday afternoon because the universe was cruel. She should have kept him. She should have found a way. She'd given him up to keep him safe, and he'd died anyway, and she hadn't been there. Hadn't held his hand. Hadn't told him she loved him. For 3 weeks, Riley barely functioned. She lost one job, almost lost another. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped caring about anything except the weight of guilt crushing her chest. And then she got angry. Riley pulled out every piece of information she had on Andrew's death. She read the police report, publicly available because she filed a FOIA request. She studied the coroner's findings. She mapped the timeline. Something was wrong. The nanny, Maria, had been at the grocery store. Sophia had died 2 years earlier from an aneurysm. Dominic had been at a business meeting across town. Andrew had been alone during his swimming lesson, which he took every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Except Andrew hated swimming. Riley had watched him at the pool once, seen how he clung to the edge, how nervous he got in deep water. Why would a child who feared water be swimming alone? Riley started investigating properly. She took photographs of the Caruso estate from different angles, documenting security cameras, blind spots, schedules. She hacked into St. Catherine's database, illegal, yes, but Riley was past caring about rules, and found something that made her blood run cold. 6 months before Andrew's death, someone had access to sealed adoption file. The access log showed an IP address traced to a law firm that represented Dominic's cousin, Lorenzo Caruso. Someone had known Andrew wasn't Dominic's biological son. Someone had found out and, 6 months later, Andrew was dead. This wasn't an accident. This was murder. The cemetery meeting which brought Riley back to that rainy afternoon, standing at her son's grave with pink roses because Andrew had loved pink, had drawn pictures of pink flowers and pink skies and told his teachers that pink was the color of happiness. Riley had come every Thursday for 6 months, always careful to arrive after Dominic left. But today, he'd stayed longer. And when he turned and saw her, when their eyes met across the rain-soaked cemetery, Riley knew she had 2 choices, run or face the truth. She chose truth. Dominic Caruso was every bit as intimidating as his reputation suggested. Tall, expensive suit, cold eyes that missed nothing. But as he approached, Riley saw something else in his face, grief that matched her own. "Who are you?" His voice was quiet, controlled, dangerous. Riley's hands tightened around the roses. "Someone who loved Andrew. I know everyone who knew my son. I've never seen you." "No." Riley's voice shook. You wouldn't have. Dominic studied her face, and Riley watched the calculation happen in his eyes. The pink roses. How did you know? Because he drew me a picture once. The lie slipped out automatically. At the park. He was so proud of his artwork, all pink flowers. He said pink was happy. Dominic went very still. Who are you really? Riley met his eyes directly. My name is Riley Bennett. And I think someone murdered your son. Our son. The words hung between them like smoke. Explain. Dominic's hand had moved inside his coat. Riley knew he was armed. Andrew was adopted. You knew that, but maybe you didn't know I'm his birth mother. Riley's voice steadied as the truth finally came out. I gave him up when he was born because I couldn't protect him. I've been watching from a distance for 7 years, and 6 months ago, someone accessed his sealed adoption file. Someone in your organization. And then Andrew died, and it was ruled an accident, but it wasn't. She pulled out her phone, showed him the photos she'd compiled. I have evidence. I have timelines. I have proof that someone knew Andrew wasn't biologically yours and wanted him gone. Dominic stared at the phone, then at Riley's face. Get in the car. We're going to have a very long conversation. How do I know you won't kill me? Because if you're telling the truth, you're the only person on earth who wants justice for my son as much as I do. His voice cracked on the word son. And if you're lying, you'll wish I'd killed you quickly. Riley followed him to the black SUV, climbed into the back seat, and wondered if she'd just made the bravest or stupidest decision of her life. Probably both. The investigation over the next 3 weeks, Riley and Dominic became unlikely partners. She showed him everything she'd collected, surveillance photos, financial records she'd obtained through questionable means, proof that Lorenzo Caruso had been making suspicious moves within the organization. In return, Dominic gave her access to resources she'd never dreamed of. Private investigators. Forensic accountants. Former FBI agents who owed him favors. Together, they uncovered the truth. Lorenzo had discovered Andrew wasn't Dominic's biological son. In their world, bloodline was everything, power passed through legitimate heirs. With Andrew gone, Lorenzo could challenge Dominic's leadership, claim the organization for himself. He'd hired a man named Victor Marchetti to ensure Andrew's accident. The pool, the timing, the empty house, all carefully orchestrated. I'm going to kill him, Dominic said when they had proof. They were in his study, evidence spread across the desk. I'm going to kill Lorenzo and everyone who helped him. No. Riley's voice was firm. We do this the right way. There is no right way in my world. Then we create one. Riley stood up, met his eyes. Andrew deserves better than more violence. We get justice properly. We make sure Lorenzo goes to prison and everyone knows what he did. We make sure Andrew's death means something. Dominic stared at her for a long moment. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. I'm a mother who lost her child. Riley's voice was steel. There's nothing stronger than that. They went to the FBI. Riley wore a wire during a meeting with one of Lorenzo's associates. Dominic used his connections to ensure the investigation moved quickly. Within 2 months, Lorenzo was arrested for conspiracy to commit murder, along with Victor Marchetti and 3 others. The trial was brutal. Riley testified, facing down Lorenzo's lawyers who tried to paint her as an unstable woman with delusions. But the evidence was overwhelming. Phone records. Financial transfers. Victor's confession in exchange for a reduced sentence. Lorenzo Caruso was sentenced to life without parole. The resolution 1 year after Andrew's death, Riley and Dominic stood together at his grave. The sun was shining, soft and warm. The pink roses Riley brought looked vibrant against the gray headstone. I've been thinking, Dominic said quietly, about what comes next. What do you mean? I'm establishing a foundation. The Andrew Caruso Foundation, for young mothers in crisis. Legal aid, financial support, protection services. Everything you didn't have when you were 18. Riley's eyes filled with tears. Dominic. I want you to run it. He turned to face her. You understand what these women need because you've lived it. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Riley. You gave up everything for Andrew, and then you got justice for him when everyone else accepted a lie. I don't know if I can. You can. His voice was certain. Andrew would want his mother to help other mothers. To make sure no woman has to make the choice you made. To make sure no child is ever hurt because of violence and greed. Riley looked down at the grave, at her son's name carved in stone. Okay, she whispered. For Andrew. Over the next 2 years, the foundation became Riley's purpose. She helped hundreds of women escape abusive situations. She provided resources for single mothers. She ensured adoption processes were safe and transparent. She became the advocate she'd needed when she was 18 and terrified. And slowly, painfully, she began to heal. 3 years later, Riley stood at the podium in the University of Chicago's auditorium. 500 people filled the seats, donors, volunteers, women whose lives the foundation had changed. She wore a simple blue dress, her dark hair pulled back. She looked professional, confident, powerful. Nothing like the broken 18-year-old who'd given birth alone, or the grieving woman who'd collapsed at a cemetery grave. 3 years ago, Riley began, her voice steady and strong. I lost my son. Andrew was 7 years old, bright and beautiful and full of potential. His death broke me in ways I didn't think I could survive. She paused, looking out at the audience. But Andrew's death also gave me purpose. It showed me that we have a responsibility to protect the vulnerable. To fight for justice even when the system fails. To make sure that no mother has to choose between safety and keeping her child. Riley's voice strengthened. The Andrew Caruso Foundation has helped over 2,000 women in the past 3 years. We've provided legal aid, financial assistance, safe housing, and counseling. We've helped women escape abuse, rebuild their lives, and keep their children safe. She looked directly at the women in the audience, women whose stories she knew intimately. You are not alone. You are not weak. You are survivors, fighters, warriors. And you deserve every resource, every opportunity, every chance to build the life you dream of. Applause thundered through the auditorium. After the speech, Dominic found her in the hallway. He would have been so proud of you. Riley smiled, eyes bright with unshed tears. I hope so. I hope he knows that his mother never stopped fighting for him, even after he was gone. He knows. Dominic's hand found hers, squeezed gently. And so do the thousands of women you've helped. You turned tragedy into purpose, Riley. That's the strongest thing anyone can do. Riley looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, at the city where she'd lost everything and found herself. She thought about the scared 18-year-old girl she'd been, signing papers with shaking hands. She thought about the grieving mother who'd stood in the rain, clutching pink roses. She thought about the warrior she'd become. And she knew, finally, that she'd given Andrew the one thing every child deserves, a mother who never stops loving them, never stops fighting for them, never stops making sure their life and death mean something. That was enough. That was everything. Epilogue 5 years after Andrew's death, Riley returned to the cemetery on a sunny spring afternoon. Pink roses in hand, like always. She knelt by the grave, running her fingers over the words carved in stone. Hi, baby. It's Mama. She told him about the foundation, about the women they'd helped this month. About the new scholarship program in his name. About the legislative changes they'd pushed through to better protect vulnerable mothers. I'm sorry I couldn't keep you, Riley whispered. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me most. But I promise you, Andrew, I promise your life and death changed the world. You made me stronger. You made me fight. You made me realize that being a mother doesn't end just because your child is gone. The wind rustled through the trees, warm and gentle. Riley stood, wiping her eyes. I love you. Always. And I'll keep making you proud. That's my promise. She walked away from the grave, not as a broken woman haunted by grief, but as a survivor who'd transformed pain into purpose. Behind her, carved into a new memorial bench by the cemetery gates, were words she'd chosen carefully, for Andrew, who taught us that love doesn't end, it transforms. The Andrew Caruso Foundation, fighting for mothers, protecting children, honoring his memory through action. Riley had learned that you can't outrun grief. You can't erase loss. But you can choose what you build from the ruins. She chose to build something beautiful. And every woman she helped, every child she protected, every life she changed, that was Andrew's legacy, carried forward by the mother who never stopped loving him.